an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 192 and 193. In these episodes, Luffy manages to disable Eneru just enough that it seems like he decides, instead of Skypeia getting destroyed or going to the endless Earth that I was expecting, he's heading to the moon? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. Florian is here in the chat. Hi, Florian. So yeah, I don't really know how to interpret that. If it's just meant to be like, cool, he's no longer their problem. He's not dead, but he's like gotten rid of. Or if our crew is going to wind up going to the moon. But honestly, if they go to the moon, I'm not going to be mad about it. I just want to say that, like, out of the gate. Our crew going to the moon is fine. Let's do it. Why not? We're already up in the sky. It's not even that much further, probably. Go ahead. What? Everybody's saying the moon was always what he meant by endless Earth. Did we know that? Or is that kind of the punchline that we didn't realize that's what he meant? I thought that he was like, all right, well, if there are other guys like Luffy down there, which is what Luffy says to him, I don't want to deal with this kind of fight over and over. So I won't go there. I'll pick another place. Florian says, we did not know that. Seraphim says, that's the punchline. Oh my God. Oh my God. That is really good. That is really good. I am not going to lie. I misunderstood his motivation there. But now that I get it, I really enjoyed that a lot. Look, I get it. We needed to stop him from destroying Skypeia, and that's all well and good, and hooray, we managed to do that. Well, we didn't. Like, a lot of it is destroyed, but I wish that we had just been able to catapult him towards the moon and be like, don't do that, just get going. Just start on your fucking journey. He is like, he has these kinds of abilities that I'm like, I don't know, maybe he can survive on their moon. Their moon isn't probably exactly like our moon, obviously. So, who knows? Maybe we'll see him again as ruler of the fucking moon, as a moon god. So, anyway, alright. Gotta back up here, because obviously I'm jumping ahead to when Luffy beats him. And I feel like last episode, when I started recording, I was like, I don't know how I make an hour out of this, because I feel like there's a lot of spinning wheels and, like, you know, stretching things out. And then once I got talking about it, I was like, oh, okay, you know what? I was able to fill an hour, no problem. As much as there was a lot of standing in place, there was still enough happening. I'm a little bit more concerned with it on this one, because there truly is a record amount of slowly panning from one face to another and repeating things. I'm starting to really understand people's decision to watch on fast forward. And I will not do that, because I just don't think it will mess with the overall, like, integrity of what I'm trying to do, which is imitate the first time viewing of this that most people would experience. But I could not help but laugh a couple of times when they decided that something somebody said was worthy of doing the slow pan from face to face, when to me, I was like, that's not... They weren't being profound. They didn't say anything surprising that we didn't already know. Seraphim says, him talking to Luffy was more, well, if you're going to make such a fuss over me obliterating everything, I'll just leave. Florian says, if we have time at the end, I have questions and stuff. Okay, yeah, that's works for me. So, we start off this episode with everybody still in the grips of the despair that had, there's been moments of despair throughout, obviously, but this one is everybody hearing this thunderous sound as he begins to destroy even the upper yard, and all, which is considered sacred by the Skypeians, and which is the homeland of the Shandorans. So nobody is happy about this. Of course, very much set aside from it being a homeland, we also have the historical value to somebody like Robin, who's very interested in that. And I had thought that it had been completely, like, he had started actually destroying it last episode. But when this begins, it seems more like he's just going for the cloud cover in order to make room to go after the actual land itself. And what he doesn't seem to understand is how Earth works. Earth is a grounding substance. And why would he understand it? I mean, even though the upper yard has been considered sacred and it's like where he's made his home, he has still been very high in the air and mostly flying and floating. He hasn't really engaged with it at a level that would educate him on the way it works. And so he goes all out with his attack here, and the fucking smoke clears and upper yard is still there. It's not, I mean, it's on fire in several places, granted, but it's still there in a way that he clearly was not expecting. And I have to also remind you that throughout all of this, the giant beanstalk that's growing through the air is beginning to tip over. It's starting to really list to one side. It really looks funny, and I can't remember if we get an explanation of why the beanstalk grows that tall. It's sort of like... It doesn't really matter, but I remember the thrust, for pun intended, of it catching the bell and holding the bell up so high that everybody thought it had been lost, but it's really just perched someplace that's like... But I don't understand, was the beanstalk already growing on the island before it got broken off and blown up into the sky? Or is the beanstalk meant to have grown as a result of getting thrown up into the air? It's just a weird thing that I feel like I missed something about, but everybody is pretty much just taking it for granted that that's a completely rational, normal thing. And, I mean, there's a lot of weird shit in this world, so maybe it is. So, anyway, he's, like, done this whole thing, and he's looking down at his work and realizing that it is still there. And there's a real sense of petulance. It's not even anger, just more like, well, that's supposed to be gone. So, yeah, I'm just going to try and do this again. On the ground, Viper is standing and watching the beanstalk begin to tip over. And it's heading right for our friends, so Usopp is panicking and telling them to get out of the way, while Viper literally just stands there with his mouth open and his eyes closed, in an attitude that I could not interpret. I'll be honest with you guys. I don't know what he was supposed to be feeling in this moment, because eventually he's just telling Luffy, like, yeah, go for it, man. But at this point, it looks like the kind of face you would have on if you're sunbathing. And he just looks so relaxed and chill in a way that I was like, that doesn't seem like a way to react to this, but I don't know. So yeah, he starts yelling, "Go, Straw Hat." And then we go over, of course, to Luffy still dragging this golden ball. He is shooting to the top of the beanstalk, and he's going to do that thing where he uses it as a ramp and careens off it. Luffy's coming at him screaming, you know, like, give me the golden bell, let it ring, yada, yada, yada. And Eneru is at this point like, I'm honestly getting pretty tired of you. This is very boring. I am going to use my giant cloud, my spherical attack cloud, and bring it down on your head, and that will take care of you. And we get this really weird... What happens is Luffy lets go of Nami. He goes flying into the air in a way that doesn't really make sense, that when he has his hand attached to a giant ball of gold, that he continues flying upwards and Nami doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. If Nami had been tossed and he stayed on the wave rider or the wave runner, then it would have worked, because he's still on a thing that I still don't really think would have been able to pull the weight, but it would still have worked. But it's just weird that, like, there comes a point where Luffy leaves them behind and then suddenly both of them fall immediately. Whatever the thing, he continues flying up into the actual sphere itself. Nami falls, gets caught on a cloud, and she thinks that for sure he's going into a giant storm to die, because even though he's rubber, even he can't stand up to this kind of attack. He's going to be in the midst of, like, a power cell, essentially, of Eneru's. Luffy has his own plan, and I use the term plan loosely. So he goes into this sphere, and we see a sort of electrical thing to signal the spot where he entered it. And then as he enters it, the entire beanstalk finally truly begins to, like, hit the ground. And inside of this sphere, Luffy he's doing gum firework, I think is the way he calls it. And he's punching out with this sphere in a million directions to try and redirect the electricity. He calls it golden peony, and essentially is trying to disrupt the flow so that it won't continue to build power in the way that Eneru is intending. So I really love, too, that as he's doing this, he yells at Eneru, and in the subtitles what it says is, "How dare you use thunder to create bad weather for the idyllic Sky Islands?" But in the dub, he says something like, we were going to have a great time on these islands, and then you had to change the weather and ruin it, which feels like such a very small, petty way of describing what was actually happening. I could not help but laugh at that, because I was like, is that the way you want to put that? I guess, but honestly, like, it's not the way I would have said it. That's all I'm saying. So he begins to punch all over the place, as I said, while calling him a electric freak, which I genuinely appreciated. And Eneru is watching this in horror and says he has gold on his hand and that can transmit electricity. I had forgotten about that and the fact that maybe he can disrupt the way this works. And he says, all I have to do is drop it before he manages to discharge the electricity. And so Eneru begins to pull it down faster and faster. And Nami is really the first one that's about to get hit. She's staring up at it as it's coming at her. And we cut at this point to the white beret who is praying. And this is something that the episode decides to do a couple times. We have him praying and talking about how there's no further action that like people can take in this situation. And the only thing that's left to do is pray. And then we go to Conus, who she begins praying, and is basically like, if there is a God, if there's God out there, and you can do anything, we need a miracle to save us. And I thought it was sort of interesting how the arc decides to circle back around to the like question of, does God exist? Because she literally says out loud, is God real? Does God exist? Which, considering how this all has been going, does feel kind of weird to me. Like, we had just met two people that were called God, and nobody seems like, you guys have mentioned that the word God in the context of what is happening in this show means something different than the word God would mean to somebody like me with my background and my understanding of the religions that I was around. And I don't understand how you can have like two different beings that you referred to as gods, and you seemed to genuinely treat as gods, and see them both actually being like just people. And it feels like, I'm saying just people, like, it's not exactly fair because Eneru isn't just people. He's a weirdo with weird powers. But the fact that they're still asking this question surprised me, because I thought that their whole idea of what God is was a lot more mundane than my concept of God, because they were willing to accept that those two people were God in a way that would never fly with me or a lot of people I know. And the fact that they're still asking, is there a God, suggests that they are looking for the bigger picture type God that I initially was imagining. And it just felt like it sort of conflicted with the understanding that I had finally started to come to of what they meant when they said God. Because it just seemed like, well, now they're just they seem to be asking the question in the unsure way that the average person would ask when they don't believe that a person walking around that they can see and talk to is a God. So I just wanted to touch on that because I found it sort of like a little bit confusing. It just feels like the concept of what God means in this arc fluctuates constantly, and I'm having trouble grasping it because what they meant initially was not what I thought they meant. It just all has sort of seemed a little, it's just been all over the place. Oh my God. Seraphim says Luffy never learned those sorts of physics, so he doesn't realize how it should work. Which, honestly, Seraphim, that's basically like Looney Tunes rules, where you can keep walking on air as long as you don't look down. Or you can keep, like, you know what I mean? And I will accept that. The idea that Luffy just thinks it should work, and so it does, that completely flies. I really do think that's probably it. Seraphim says, that is a cultural/language thing. They realize Eneru is just an asshole with a god complex now, but still believe in the idea of God. Florian says, I think this is something that Oda wanted. He low-key wants you to think about what God means, I think. Gus says, in this arc, it means something different. But in general, to most people in the One Piece world, I think it would be similar to what you'd know. And I think they still have a concept of a creator, just like that's not what the word God means here. So it just feels weird because if they have the concept of a creator God that's different from these gods, well, not gods, but like you wouldn't use the same word for both, would you? And maybe they don't. Maybe it's a translation thing. I'm just, because I think I'm getting what you're saying, Gus, but it feels like within the dialogue that's not differentiated at all or really made clear. That's really my issue, is that I feel like I'm losing the thread because they're using the same word to refer to all these different beings. And like, I get that they don't think Eneru is a god anymore, but they did, and they also believed that What's-His-Face was a god. So they were willing to believe that a mortal person with enough power was a god in a way that feels like a really low threshold, like anybody could be. And yet they're stopping and asking, well, is God real? And I'm like, you guys sort of flung out the title to whoever. It doesn't seem like a question you would ask because you all feel very prepared to call anybody God. Let's see. Gus says, just like that concept's out there in the world and people know about it. Not that everyone believes in this one God or anything like that. Seraphim says, in Japanese, all those types of spirits are called kami, which the only real way to translate to English is God. Okay, so they're like a subset of a I wish that they had like done something to come up with a different word or something to use so that when they start asking this question, it feels like it makes more sense. Even like a demigod, you know, because that's still somebody who has like, or I don't know. It's not really like important in the end, but I just found it kind of confusing. So anyway, we start to go to a monologue where Viper is talking about how, like, you know, you're not going to get us down. You won't destroy our homeland. The White Beret is talking about how we've lost the place that was our homeland, and that pretty much like shuts the door behind us and we can't move forward because we don't have anywhere to go. So praying is the best that we can do right now. And honestly, I am not somebody who prays often, but that, in my opinion, is a really good way to handle things. I don't have a specific belief system. I don't even really believe in God in the way that, you know, like I believe that there is something out there, a force that like binds everything. But I don't think that there's a being that's conscious and watching. I think that there's a sort of like sameness amongst everything. And that if you focus on it and get in touch with it in a way that's like conscious and purposeful and really deliberate, that you can get benefits from that connection. Whether that's like a manifestation of the answer to your prayers remains to be seen. But even if it is just comfort of a mental kind, that's still something very valuable. And I find that when I am in a place where I don't know what to do and I'm feeling like stuck, like having that moment and just putting it out there in the way of prayer can really just, it's almost like therapy, except it's not about getting feedback. It's about getting things off your chest and speaking aloud. And sometimes that can lead to you realizing a solution as you're speaking. Because once you put an actual name and sentence to your problems, it can suddenly be really obvious. Oh, I should do this. I didn't even think of that. Or you can talk it through, which is what, when I pray, my whole, like, the way I pray is, hey, so haven't talked to you in a while. This is what's going on. I don't know what to fucking do. I am really burnt out and I'm feeling really stuck. If you can help me, like, decide between this and that, or point to something new, I'm listening. I'm open to it. Just wanted to put it out there that this is giving me a problem. And I have a very conversational style about it, as if God were just like somebody at a bar chatting with me about my problems. And that helps just talk through it. Or you can do it in the way that he's doing, which is sort of, I am surrendering the problem. It isn't about what I think we should do anymore. I'm going to put it to another power, somebody else or something else, to organize how this should happen in a way that feels like it's in tune with everything else in the universe. And surrendering things and giving them up can also be just such a relief, even if it's just a mental thing. Even though you actually are still part of the problem, you're still having to deal with the consequences of things, even though you're still embroiled in it. Deciding that you're going to let it go from your mind, even for a few minutes, and give it room and space, that can be a huge relief as well. So, yeah, long story short, I am a big proponent of prayer. It's like something to me that is, you can call anything you want prayer, pretty much. But I find it to be surprisingly comforting in a way that gives me a little bit of insight into why so many people turn to religion for so many things. And it's not really the way that it works is obviously a huge problem, but the instinct that people have to do that makes a lot of sense when I go through that experience and realize that it does make me feel better. I could see how tempting it would be to just be like, oh, well, here's a book that gives you all the instructions, and also a group of people that believes the same thing you do, and also nothing is your problem, really. It's all up to God, so you don't have to manage any of it. I mean, it's not my bag, but I get it. So anyway, this thing with Conus, she's thinking about, like, whether or not her deciding to, like, turn them in, essentially, is what doomed them, if all of this wouldn't have happened if she hadn't done that. And honestly, Conus can't know this, but it would have gone this way anyway, because Eneru was on his way to finishing up his project. I don't know if his priests would have gone with him. It sounds to me like his obsession with the endless verse was not something that was going to include the rest of his dudes, and that they were just serving a purpose until he didn't need them anymore, and he would definitely have left them behind. Because he seems to have planned on destroying all of Skypeia from the start, and I might be misinterpreting that. But if that's true, I do kind of want to know, would he have killed them, the priests? Would he have just been like, you can, like, escape Skypeia before I destroy it, but you can't come with me? Or would he have brought them with him? He just doesn't seem like the type to want to bring them. But also, he does like having hangers-on and cronies and worshippers, basically. And while they had their own power, it does not feel like they were in competition with him for, like, in the pecking order at all. So maybe he would have. I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, Conus is blaming herself, and I really don't believe that. I understand her feelings about turning them in specifically, and maybe things would have gone differently for our crew, but what's happening with Eneru overall would have happened anyway. So this is when we see the entire cloud basically disappear, and everybody on the ground is looking up at it and realizing that Luffy managed to completely, like, he dissipated it and the sky is clear blue. We see Eneru's ship, and we also see what looks like a shining star, which I'm assuming is Luffy's gold hand. And then we have him begin to plummet to Earth. Because there's a part of me that was like, is he just going to chill up there? He does not. He begins to plummet downward. And as he plummets, he goes right past Eneru's ship. And he says, I'll ring you. And he winds up his fist to take a shot. And Eneru is like, all right, I'm not here to play anymore. We're going to do 200 million volts. And he becomes giant. He looks much more like a traditional Buddha figurine all of a sudden. And he is just wild looking. So he says, the next time that bell rings will be the end of this battle. Are you trying to hang on to such a legend? I am God. And we see his eyebrows are on fire. They're rippling in a way that is honestly pretty cool looking. I wish he had looked like that a little bit longer. There's something very Dragon Ball Z about this whole vibe, honestly. I don't know if it's the spikiness. But basically, he yells at Luffy, who and what do you think you are? I will absolutely destroy you. I can just make another one of those things. You think that you're going to beat me, and you're deluded, and it's pathetic. And he launches outward. Again, everybody on the ground is watching this, and I can't tell how much anybody is really following. But he tries to shoot this volt at Luffy, and Luffy just straight up is like, I told you it doesn't work on me. As he runs up the dude's arm, which is bringing me back to, oh my god, I just asked about the guy's name last episode and I've already forgotten. Don Krieg. He runs up Don Krieg's arm at one point as well. I honestly really kind of like that play. The idea of using somebody's own punch arm as your little, walkway to get to them and attack them. There's just something very disrespectful about it that I appreciate. So Luffy, he punches Eneru with his golden fist. Eneru uses a trident to try and attack Luffy, which Luffy manages to dodge and grab right before it actually strikes him. It's very hot. And Eneru says, your arm is yanking you, which is going to make the spear penetrate even deeper. But if you let go of it, you're going to fall. So what are you going to do? And he does do that little, you really did pretty well. Getting this far, I am a little bit impressed. But you're not going to beat me, and you need to stop it. And Luffy is basically there's steam coming out of his mouth. And he is thinking back to what's at stake. He has that moment of remembering Conus and everything. And he lets go and begins to plummet down. He gets caught on the edge of the cloud that Nami is on and uses it to yank himself back upward again with the momentum of it. And we have Eneru holding his tridents across himself, in front of himself, as Luffy launches another punch, which Eneru watches coming at him and just thinks it's too fast. And that's it. I have to be honest, you guys. I was not impressed. He's been fighting Eneru this whole time with what for me looks like a lot of very similar attacks. And then all of a sudden, we're just supposed to believe this one punch is the one punch that's just too fast. And I am not buying it. I really thought we were going to get some sort of like the fact that Luffy uses the big golden ball to dissipate the cloud. That felt much more on brand for me. He's doing something with what had been a disadvantage, and he's turning it into the problem solver. You know, this gold was attached to him specifically to weigh him down and make him ineffective, and he is just using it to screw this guy's weapon up. Very good. Fine with that. But then we get to this, and it's just a particularly hard punch that's too fast. And it felt so much like we just ran out of things to do and needed him to be beaten, so we're just going to do this, I guess. Especially considering this guy is allegedly made of lightning, and the term is called quick as lightning. Lightning is the standard for being faster than thought. And the idea that Luffy just manages to suddenly be faster than him there's no extra anything that happened in that moment to make it feel like he powered himself up to a degree that he hadn't been before. Even if there was a way for him to sort of absorb that energy and redirect it, you know, Eneru uses the 200 million volts. And if we were meant to think, okay, so the gold can redistribute electricity, right? That's what Luffy did to destroy the spherical cloud. What if Luffy could somehow collect the 200 million volts and, like, in the gold and do something with that to redirect it? It wouldn't necessarily hurt Eneru, because Eneru is made out of electricity, so I don't think it would harm him, but you could at least justify Luffy sinking the entire airship. It would blow the airship up or set it on fire. It would disable that in a way that would feel really believable. And since Eneru doesn't die anyway, it would make a lot more sense in the end for that to be what Luffy does, to turn his own weapon against him, since he had already kind of started to do that. And he still has the gold to do it again. So I fully expected that we were going to see a new ingenious way of doing the same thing, but just changing it up a little bit. And that was going to be how Eneru was defeated. But instead, it's just this very sudden, oh, he's punching too fast. And it feels so lame. Like, it just feels really, really weak and lazy in a way that I'm not used to with this show. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you just hand wave away, and some might call that lazy, but I think it works with the style of the show. But usually when we get to, like, the big bad and the confrontation, the way that Luffy beats them tends to be like him outsmarting them somehow and doing something that they hadn't thought of. And this just felt very disappointing after all this build-up to just have it be kind of luck. It feels like it doesn't even seem really like... I don't know. So I just had to express my sort of disappointment on that, because I honestly kind of missed the fact that this was the winning punch. And when Eneru panics and we see the ship beginning to get destroyed as Eneru is essentially like, he is pushed through it on Luffy's fist, and it destroys a bunch of the decking of the ship. I was like, wait, is this supposed to be it? And then we see the bell, like he's hurtling towards it. And I was like, oh, maybe it is. And there was something about it that once I realized that, like, okay, Luffy just really wants to ring it, I started to extra think, well, maybe he could have just targeted the bell and not Eneru. It doesn't matter, but it just, I don't know. It just felt so underwhelming that I was looking for like other things that could have worked or might be about to happen to sort of fill that gap, because it didn't seem like enough to me. So anyway, he is pushing Eneru towards the golden bell. And then we get all of these like monologues from different people. We have the chieftain of the Shandorans talking about how like all of this started 400 years ago, and all we wanted to do was like live in peace. And then we go to Gonfall, who is like, man, I can't believe we fought over this upper yard. Like, that's not what this should have been about. And then we cut to all of the people who got rescued from Angel Island, and they are all praying. Every single one of them. And at this point, Sanji, Chopper, and Zoro all wake up. I believe it's supposed to be that, like, the sound of the bell is supposed to have been what triggered them getting woken. But either way, the sound of the bell, I will stand by the fact that it is really scary sounding. And so the fact that everybody responds really positively and talks about how, like, it has to be that bell, I was just thinking, I am really glad it works for you guys. I'm happy for you. I don't get it. It's very scary. But I'm glad that it's inspiring all of these people to feel like a miracle has just happened. And yeah, I sure. All right. You know, I feel like I have made my feelings on that intensely scary bell very clear, and we don't have to dwell on that anymore. Luffy gets what he wants, and that shit begins to ring as Eneru's ship and then Eneru fall from the sky. And all of the people of Angel Island are standing around watching it fall and realizing it's his ship, and that means that he is defeated. The bell, meanwhile, is like plummeting to Earth. And I don't know if it's going to be found or land on the Old Timers Island or what, but it would be pretty cool if it just landed intact and they just had the bell and they could do something new with it. It doesn't seem like the upper yard is going to sink back down into the ground. I kind of wondered if that was where we were going to go with this, that the piece of the island that had been carried up into the air was perhaps going to come back down and not necessarily completely reconnect, but maybe. And it doesn't look like that's what's going to happen. It seems like it's going to stay up in the sky, and all of the residents, both the Shandorans and the people of Angel Island, are going to come together and live on it together. And they're going to just continue to have their community like up in the sky, which honestly I think is pretty dope. I don't want there to not be like Skypeia anymore. So, you know, they need the Verth to manage to eat for their crops and stuff, I guess. I don't wonder how they got along before it was up there. Let's see. Gus says, I think a lot of the action sometimes doesn't translate into the anime very well. Like, it didn't look too fast, quote unquote, in the anime because it's stretching it out. In the manga, it was probably like 1 or 2 panels in a very dramatic 2-page spread or something. I haven't read this part of the manga in a while, but I know that happens at some points later too. Seraphim says, agreed. I think this is more the anime just not doing it well. Okay. Yeah, I can see what you mean. If it's stretching things out and slowing them down to make them look really intense, and they've been doing everything sort of slowed down, there's no feeling of it being different than it had been before. It's too bad because this show feels like I completely understand the need to stretch certain things out. I sympathize with that. But then there's so much potential that feels like, okay, couldn't you have done this and that and filled this with something that was slightly more, it feels like they're being so hemmed in by needing to get it exactly the same as the manga. And with it being a really different medium, I wish they were allowed to like embellish a little here and there to make it feel like more natural. I don't know how true it is that they decide to like be completely faithful to the manga. I don't know how much they decide. You guys have told me about different, very specific plot changes that were made. And most of that was because American audiences view their children as like literal infants. And so he can't even be smoking. But I'm not really sure about, like the idea of staying faithful being the specific thing that keeps them up against a wall and sort of forced into doing it the way they do. I just feel like you have to, when you're adapting something, face facts that a different medium takes a really different way of telling a story. And you can keep things very similar, but it's not going to work out exactly the same way. So Gus says they don't stay totally faithful to it, I think is what he is referring to. So if they don't, then like even more so, you could have just had that be like a really fast moment and had the aftershock be the thing that is slowed down and get to see the speed of it being like lightning fast. Even if it were done that way, though, I want to register, I still wouldn't really love this because, again, Luffy just suddenly can punch super fast. Where is that coming from? What is that? Why? How come he wasn't just doing that from the beginning? Or if he was, why didn't it work like this? Why is it suddenly possible? That's really what I have a problem with more, to be honest. It's not like the look of it didn't work. The logic of it doesn't work. And for me, that's like, you could change the way this is animated all day, but it seems like that fact is not going to be the thing that changes, and that's the part that I really actually take issue with. But it doesn't really matter because, like, Eneru's not dead. Nobody's dead. I should just say, I had been thinking that, like, all these people had gotten killed, and then our guys were meant to be still alive, and it seemed really arbitrary who died and who didn't. We find out later that pretty much everybody made it, which is weird because the talk of the mantra and the way that they can hear voices going out, that seemed very definitively to be death. And then it's all completely walked back. And we just see a bunch of dudes resuscitating one another and walking out of the woods like, hey, buddy, are you okay? It's going to be a while before you're back to normal again. And honestly, it doesn't really seem like it's going to be a while because they party like the next day or that night and they're fine. But it was just kind of a weird thing that we have. I had already decided to accept that nobody's going to die because you guys have told me about what Oda feels about that. I did not think that that was going to apply to all of the characters that we see at all. I thought we're going to have red shirts and the guys that we are closest to, the crew and the people that they're directly involved with for this arc, they are definitely not going to ever actually die. But it really looks like there are almost no actual casualties that aren't bad guys. And I may be misinterpreting that, or maybe it's just supposed to be that the guys who got zapped by Eneru are still alive, and the dudes who were fighting the little lammy dudes, goat guys, they did die. But mostly we just see people waking up and being okay, and there's no real distinction. I don't ever see like bodies or, so I guess absolutely everybody survives. And that's extremely cheap. I really thought at least we were having, and even though it didn't make sense that some would die from Eneru's attack and others wouldn't, even if it doesn't make sense, I would have let it go because plot armor. But to find out that none of them died, and that mantra that was telling them that somebody's voice was gone, doesn't even necessarily indicate a death. That means that Isa freaking out about the voices disappearing was nothing. She didn't need to panic the way that she was. It was just them being knocked unconscious, and she was interpreting it as a death, which feels like going back and rewatching this and knowing none of them are dead, and then watching her panic about it would really like undercut that completely and make her just annoying. When they were actually dying, I felt so much sympathy for this poor kid who's like aware of the death of every person as it happens. But then to find out like it doesn't seem like any of them were dead, and she's just losing her mind, crying constantly. Kid, shut the fuck up then. They're not dead. Just go sit down somewhere and get a hold of yourself. Stop it. I don't want to hear it. They'll go splash some water on their face and wake them up if it bothers you so bad. I don't have a lot of sympathy for kids. That's what it comes down to, really. Gus says, that is fair. I do think it was a bit anticlimactic compared to like the final attack on Crocodile. Florian says, it does, and I love it. He's saying it does stay faithful and you love it? Seraphim says, do note we never see that big guy that Robin took out. Don't mess with Nico Robin. Well, and that's the thing. That's what I'm saying is like all the guys that were bad guys, they genuinely seem dead. So it's just that our good guys, in quotes, none of them died, but all the bad guys definitely did die. Which is really, I mean, that's taking it kind of far, even for this show. I never thought it was going to just be that simple, you know. And like, you know, as much as I understand that Oda doesn't want to kill characters for no reason, you could kill characters that we don't know about at all. That isn't really going to have the same effect that you're trying to avoid. I don't think it would bother that equilibrium at all. And he does kill some people, you know, like we know that Nami's foster mom basically is actually dead. We know the girl that Zoro was training with is actually dead. And I say that, I don't know, maybe they're not, but I think they are. And if they weren't, that would be kind of fucked up and cheap. And those were people that we had really grown to like, but because it had happened already by the time we get to it, he seems to act like that doesn't really count, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, just having a bunch of sort of random Shandoran warriors actually be killed, I don't know. I don't see the problem with it. I don't really understand why he would also even avoid that. I feel like it would be a legitimate sacrifice that they were trying to do something to save their homeland, and that's like respectful. And to have there be no casualties that I've seen feels kind of disrespectful in a way. Gus says this arc is one of the worst offenders. Like in Alabasta, at least a bunch of rebels and royals died in the rebellion. It was just Pell and Igarim. In this arc, it's everyone. Yeah, I was thinking that, Gus, about the previous one because, as you guys know, when Pell proved to still be alive, I was very irritated. But there was still a lot of like actual loss. So I don't know. It's just a weird thing that I wasn't expecting. I thought I had really decided, okay, the fact that people can't die, I accept it, and we're going to move forward with that understanding and see it through that lens. But I didn't take it quite far enough, and being caught off guard with that again felt kind of like, man, I don't want to keep moving those goalposts in my head because then it starts to feel like, what are we doing? You know? Seraphim says, yeah, this arc is the worst the story gets at this. Oda gets better at this going forward. Okay. And I want to just say too, I liked this arc mostly. I really did love the whole concept of Skypeia, the weirdness of gods and them believing that they're gods, and the strangeness of the island breaking and going up into the sky and all that. I think all of that works really, really well and is actually pretty interesting. It just, one, did not need to take this long, and two, ended poorly. So I feel like if we went in there and tightened some things up, or maybe added some more subplot in some places to support the stretching it out. We could have had more of Conus organizing everybody, for example. But Conus pretty much goes from yelling at everybody to get on their ships and get out to being alone on the Going Merry and crying constantly. And that's all she does. We could have done a lot more with that, you know, or we could have even done more with the White Berets, who I started to grow rather fond of as things progressed. There's just a lot of potential to do something more and something interesting. And instead, the show continues to just do the slow pan across faces. And it's a shame because some of the characters they introduce, I think, could be really, really fun. And we don't get to see quite as much of them in the ways I want as we could have with people who I feel like were a little bit more imaginative about how to handle it. So anyway, it ends with, like I said, pretty much everybody waking up, everybody celebrating the sound of this bell and how beautiful it is. And we see Old Timer and his two buddies celebrating the sound of it. And we get an explanation for the giant shadows that we saw, that looked like these giant monsters, and it's like a refraction of the light casting these elongated shadows of people in Skypeia, which I had forgotten all about those shadows. And I think that's a really neat explanation. I really like that. And they see Luffy's very distinctive shadow flying through the air, and they understand that he's the one that rang the bell. And honestly, his shadow is so hysterical. I'm trying. I don't know how many of you guys play Animal Crossing, but there's an Animal Crossing channel on the Discord. And I found a new hat that they have that's like a round-topped red band straw hat. It's exactly Luffy's hat. I am trying to assemble an outfit that looks like Luffy. And if any of you guys have elements that you think would work particularly well to give me a Luffy-ish look, I would be interested. That's all I'm saying. The thing is that he often has his red shirt open in the front, and there's no shirts like that. But, what can you do? So, Luffy, Nami, and who's the other person that's with them? Is it Isa? They come running back. And Luffy has this giant bag that he's dragging behind him, which I really thought was the gold. I thought that he was bringing the gold back as something that they could take away as a prize from the situation. The gold is gone. It's not on his hand anymore. Did I miss seeing how he got it off? Or is it supposed to be that punching Eneru melted it or something? It's just gone. And then we have this giant round bag of food that Zoro asks him, where'd you get all the food? And I really thought they were going to say it isn't food, it's gold. But it turns out it is. Luffy's eating, has his mouth full the whole time, and later on we see him and Usopp just completely full-bellied. So yeah, I was just very... I want to know, that was a giant ball of solid gold. Why wouldn't they keep any of that? I fully expected that to be something. Oh, Florian's saying when he rang the bell, the ball broke. Okay, I didn't see that was what happened. I thought that it was parts of the bell breaking, but it's just the ball and the bell is completely intact. Okay. Yeah, I really thought that was going to be something, that they would have some gold. And, there are some stories where everybody getting suddenly rich would ruin the story, and you can't have it. But this isn't one of the shows that I feel like that would be a problem. I feel like you could have everybody get totally flush, and it would just be interesting, because every one of these characters is a maniac who would do weird shit with their gold, and I would like to see it. If we're going to do filler episodes, let's have filler episodes of all of them spending all of their gold and watching how they do it. because I think that would be very entertaining. Let's see. Gus says, so after the next 2 episodes, which is the end of this arc, there is a 10-episode filler arc. I don't think we're covering it, but it's one of the best filler arcs in the series, so you should watch it if you have time. Also, before the next canon arc, you should read the manga chapters on that pinned comment in Discord. Also, read the comment itself, since there's info about how manga is read that is important. Okay, noted. Thank you, Gus. Yeah, and I saw that there is like a filler arc that's been left out of the coverage, and I try to always watch those because it's just fun. I just want to know what, because usually there's like a little reference. It's not necessary to the story to watch them, but they'll mention something sometimes, and I'm like, if I hadn't watched it, I would not know what the fuck they were talking about. So I try to, and I'll make an extra effort on this one. It's a nice show to just have on in the background when I'm not needing to cover it. It's a like perfect show for that. So I will try and do that. And yeah, everything wraps up like Pagaya seems to be fine. And all of the other people, like we have just this big party that's happening where everybody is trying to coexist on this land and recover. And we get kind of intercut with the party of all of these people, the party that happened way back when. And just the friendship that had been there and the different descendants sort of wondering whether or not, Noland and, what is the name of the other guy? Whether or not from beyond the grave, they heard the bell and they're like smiling down on the situation and the fact that they've made peace at this point. And that is pretty much the end of the episode. I don't think I'm missing anything here. I'm just trying to make sure. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, yeah, I approve of the fact that they're just going to stay in the sky. Wish that it had been handled better otherwise. But overall, I did like this arc. I just wish that had been done a little bit differently. Calgara, thank you, Florian. All right. Well, guys, next episodes, regular ones, then we'll be skipping 10. So just so you guys know, 2 episodes on Friday as usual. I'll watch 10 episodes over the weekend, which shouldn't be a problem. And then Tuesday we will come back and pick up where we left off there. All right, everybody. Thank you again. Thanks for coming. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.